Welcome back to the Endeavors AI podcast, a show where we cut through the noise of AI and talk about how it actually works in the real world of business. I'm your host, Colin McKee, and today I'm sitting down with someone who lives at one of the more fascinating crossroads of the legal world. Ryan Alexeev is the managing partner of North County Legal in San Diego, California, and she does something most attorneys don't. She practices both estate planning and immigration law, including the cross border tax planning that sits right in between them. She's been doing this for 17 years. She holds a legal master's degree in taxation. And frankly, she's at the front row seat to two areas of law that are getting reshaped in real time, one by the current administration and the other by AI. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's get right into it because you've frankly got a very genuinely interesting story. And so when I was preparing for this conversation, the first thing that jumped out at me was your practice mix, estate planning and immigration, cross border tax planning. That's a combination you don't just stumble into. So if you would, take us back. How did you end up at that crossroads?
Yes, of course. When I first started my own practice back in 2009, I had decided to do estate planning and family law because I could see the intersection of the two. And I found that all of the people that were coming to me for family law advice, for the most part, they were foreign nationals. And their US citizen spouses were telling them that, oh, because you stayed at home and took care of the kids and didn't work, all the money is mine. And I'm going to have you deported. And so I did a lot of educating people on community property since California is a community property state to let them know that if there's no prenup, ultimately community property. So not all of the money is just theirs. And then on the immigration front, I was letting them know, well, if it's not a fraudulent marriage, you don't have to worry about being removed because, again, if it was a fraudulent marriage, the US citizen also has to worry too. So I actually really enjoyed educating people on their rights from the immigration front, and I didn't enjoy the family law perspective as much. It takes a special type of attorney, and I am not that special type of attorney for that. So I decided to do estate planning and immigration from that point moving forward.
It's a great story. And what I love is it wasn't really planned. It just kind of what your clients were telling you where the need was. And you followed up with that, to suit the needs of your clients.
Absolutely.
Very admirable. So, an obvious follow up to that is most estate planning attorneys never touch immigration, and most immigration attorneys would never touch estate planning. So, why do you think more firms don't see that overlap?
They probably see the overlap. I mean, but again, it overlaps into pretty much all areas of law. So any area that I practice in overlaps with others. And so I don't touch everything. It's just when I decided to do these two practice areas, other people would say, well, if you had to choose one, which would you choose? And I would tell them, well, there's over 100 different areas of law. I chose these two. So I've already narrowed it down. And I did these two because I really enjoyed them. And I have to be honest, for the first several years, I didn't really see how they connected, but I felt like they connected and I couldn't quite pinpoint it. And about 7 years in, I started to see that, yes, there is a need for estate planning for non US citizens, and it's more complicated than just planning for US citizens. So I had reached out to other attorneys, and most other attorneys don't do this. At bigger firms, they usually have an estate planning department and they have an immigration department if they have an immigration department. And they don't really overlap. They kind of work together, but not fully. And so there were only a couple people in the United States that really kind of focused on this and not quite to the extent that I do it. So I asked them, are there any books, anything like that? And the answer ultimately was not really. So I decided to go back and get a legal master's in taxation from USD. And the best part is it's one of the best LLM programs for taxation in the nation. And it happened to be in my backyard. So it was a natural choice for me. When I was there, the dean was amazing because he understood that I was a returning lawyer, that I was coming for a purpose. And so, although there's required courses, he said, we can make certain courses not required and other courses required. What are you looking for? So, I was able to tailor my education to really focus on this cross border scenario where I could learn the estate and gift tax side of planning as well as pre immigration tax planning to help my clients. And then the fun thing about what I do is, as I learned how it really overlaps, is that depending on people's needs, if they're in the United States and have assets overseas, we can figure out how that factors into their estate plan. If they aren't US citizens, we can figure out how that factors into their estate plan. And if they are immigrants that are coming to the United States looking to get green cards, we usually want to see how will that affect them on the tax side if they're getting rid of properties and other assets overseas because the US has the biggest, widest reaching tax system in the world. So we want to make sure that they're not paying tax on stuff they wouldn't have had to pay tax on if they weren't a green card holder. So sometimes they can take care of that first, then we do the green card process, and then they're subject to US taxation.
Lots to unpack there, for sure. So, we're recording this during the second Trump administration, and immigration policy has been, to put it diplomatically, dynamic, ever changing. So, from your seat as someone who's practicing immigration for 17 years across multiple administrations, what's actually different this time?
So immigration for the most part has always been kind of a headline, regardless if there's a Democrat in office or a Republican. Under the first Trump administration, I think we saw the largest changes. He was in office, I think days in office is technically 1,053 business days. And there were over 1,000 changes in immigration law. So, needless to say, a client would sign a fee agreement on Monday. I'd have to call them Tuesday, tell them the scope had changed. I'd have to call them Thursday, tell them the scope had changed. And so, trying to practice in that dynamic was very interesting. When he came back into office, I figured it would be the same where we'd be, as lawyers, be getting whiplash from all the changes. This time around, it's been different. The changes have been a little bit slower. They've been more forceful. And what we have seen is that they haven't necessarily been lawful. So, being a lawyer, following the rules of the law, having to fight against an administration that is not following the rules of the law has been extremely challenging. And just to give you an example of how things change, you and I had first spoken about 2 weeks ago. And last Friday, there was a huge change that made the news. How USCIS is no longer going to process adjustment of status from in the United States unless if it's an extraordinary circumstance. So the problem with that is that's not founded in law. It's not founded in case precedent. There are going to be lawsuits. I'm just waiting for those to start happening. We've already seen requests for evidence coming out asking why do you feel like you should be allowed to adjust status within the United States? Most of the processes that we have in place actually do allow you to adjust status. There are non immigrant visas that do allow immigrant intent. Even ones that don't allow immigrant intent, like student visas. I mean, how many people find the love of their life while they're in school, away at college? Most people. So they're now saying, well, if that's your scenario where you came here with the intent to study, you planned on going back home, but now you've found somebody that you want to marry and spend the rest of your life with, you can get married, but you can't finish the process here. So you have to leave. And they said that's going to go ahead and free up USCIS and their time to make other decisions, and the embassies can go ahead and process these. Well, needless to say, it's going to delay the process because it's already taking a couple of years. And how hard is it to be married, first of all? Second of all, could you imagine having to be married long distance for a few years while this process played out? So again, it's not promoting family unity. It's going to create bigger backlogs. It's going to cause more divorce. There is going to be more backlash, but I already know lawyers that are gearing up to litigate this. So it'll be a good time.
So I'm sure the phones are just ringing off the hook constantly for you. And after this, new news, there's more questions than answers. What if you had to pick 2 to 3 main FAQs that your intake is gathering? What are people so curious about? What is it that they reach out to you most about in this tumultuous time that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, so I definitely like with estate planning and immigration, there's definitely very different questions. On the immigration front, people have, since Friday, they have been reaching out to ask, how does this affect my case? We proactively reached out to clients, other client or potential clients they have been calling, wanting to know what does this mean for them. When this news was released, I instantly went ahead and posted a blog on my website because I knew this is a question that people are going to be researching, and I didn't need a million calls. I wanted people to be informed. And then if they have further questions, yes, set up a consultation. That's the biggest one. Something else that was a very big change this year too was, well, actually, I guess it happened at the end of last year for this year, the change in the H-1Bs. So for specialty occupations, there is a new $100,000 fee for employees. It does not apply to everybody. It applies to some people. So I had tons of calls from clients saying, "Does this apply? We can no longer afford to hire this employee. I don't want to pay their salary, which is six figures, plus an additional $100,000." So we have to be very careful because that does not apply to everybody. It typically applies to people who are getting their first H-1B and they're not in the United States. But even those who are getting their first H-1B within the United States, if they travel, it could trigger that $100,000 fee. And we don't want them to trigger that accidentally because that's a big accident. So I'd say those are some of the biggest ones that I've gotten from an immigration front recently based on law changes. And then also, I have a lot of extraordinary ability visas and national interest waivers that I deal with. And they also call because they don't understand. They're like, "I know this person. They're not as qualified as I am. They got approved. Why am I getting denied?" And honestly, with that one, it is hit or miss right now. We see people that don't have the strongest of cases getting approved, and we see people with amazing cases that could come here, really make a difference in the United States, and they're being denied. And there is no rhyme or reason on that front.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the gold card program, and you kind of touched on that. What else? Any other details on that for those of us that might not know it as well as you?
Absolutely. So it's interesting because the Gold Card program, which people have heard about, is basically where you can get a green card. You pay, they have a couple different levels, but basically $1 million contribution. And the administration believes that if you have $1 million to pay for this contribution, you must be extraordinary in business. Okay. I don't agree with that, but whatever. It's not about me, it's about what the laws are. So it was very fascinating because when he had announced this, I figured that they were going to take the EB-5 program, which is an investor type of program, where you're investing a certain dollar amount into certain areas, building businesses, creating jobs for US people. And I thought they were going to go with that. It makes natural sense. However, we started to see denials on the EB-1, which is an extraordinary visa, and the national interest waivers, which I thought was interesting. Of course, under a Trump administration, everything's always interesting. So I knew something was going on, just didn't know what it was. And then after we started seeing denials there, then more details came out about the Gold Card program. And what they're literally doing is they are using the EB-1s and the national interest waiver categories for this Gold Card. So there are caps on these categories. So there's not an unlimited amount. We really don't ever reach those caps because we just don't have enough people applying, but it is entirely possible. And my suspicion is that they were trying to preserve as many of these visas for green cards under these programs for people who are willing to pay that extra $1 million contribution. And so USCIS was, probably told internally that you need to open these up for people for the $1 million. So keep them open and you have discretion to deny. So where you can deny, please do it.
What interesting times.
Yes.
All right. Well, so switching gears to what I like the meat of it, the AI and Endeavor's AI. You said something that kind of stuck with me in our first conversation that you had a lot of clients, and reasonably so, are using the tools that are out there, ChatGPT being probably the most popular and well known, and they're using it as a tool, which they should, but maybe putting a little bit too much credence on what the tool can do, throwing documents in there, and letting it run through ChatGPT, and then what gets back is, in your words, horribly wrong. So tell me a little bit about that, maybe an instance where that happened, and how horribly wrong was it?
Absolutely. So I find that ChatGPT, it scares me from a legal perspective. Honestly, like it's good to get your ideas flowing, maybe to help you write a letter. I would say to revise it in your own words, but it's good to help you with templates on things. I have found that when people use it to ask questions under law, it's about maybe sometimes 80% right. I'll give it that much credit. And then 20% horribly wrong. And it's that 20% that's going to land you in hot water. So I had a client not that long ago contact me, and they used it in a way that you would think would be okay. They wanted to do estate planning, they wanted to make updates, and so they ran their wishes through ChatGPT. This is what I'd like to do. How can I achieve this? And then they brought that information to me. First of all, it was pages and pages of their wishes and what ChatGPT was telling them to do. And second of all, it went ahead and said, and this is how your lawyer can achieve this. So I read through it and I was like, you legally cannot do this. It's not enforceable. It's extremely burdensome if you try. It's ripe for litigation. So that was very interesting to have to go back to the client and tell them why the ChatGPT answer was wrong and why I couldn't achieve it, even though it was literally saying, this is what your lawyer has to do. It's very easy. Just go ahead and do it this way. So it was kind of a battle between what AI was telling them was legal and possible and what a lawyer who actually knows what's legal and possible was telling them, no, this is not a good way to do it. I did let them know in order to achieve their wishes, ways that we can do it, but it was far more restrictive. It wasn't in line with what they ultimately wanted. So again, we just had that open conversation of like, okay, you're saying you want this. This is what we can do to achieve that under the law, but you don't want it to be that restrictive. So what do you truly, truly want? What's the end goal? And then we came up with a plan that worked from them from that respect. So I was grateful that they were able to listen to what I suggested. But again, when they're sending pages and pages for me to read over beforehand, it definitely affects my pricing model because I have to start factoring those types of things in. I love to work on flat fee for clients so they know what to expect. But if they're going to start sending emails like that, it's going to have to include an hourly component as well too.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you said you're appreciative of your clients for using the tool, for letting it run and do its course. And I think you even mentioned that what scares you a little bit more is those that don't even try to use it, right? It can be used for good to do a first run scan of, some instances, but relying heavily on it like it's legal counsel is where we get into the weeds and some scary places, right? Where it goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like asking it, I bought a house, should it be in a trust? And hopefully the response would be, well, yes. So anything other than that, I would be concerned about. So, and again, it's like anytime we have medical issues, we know we always turn to Dr. Google first and check it out just to see, is this something I should reach out to my doctor for? And yes, realistically, we should be reaching out to the doctor anyway. It's the
Yep.
same thing in law.
Yep. And then you also mentioned that you have plans to go into probate as well to cover because you see the potential downfalls in people relying too heavily on what the LLMs are providing.
Yes, absolutely. So, because more people are using things to draft it themselves, or maybe they're going to their CPA and their financial advisor who can provide great resources for them on the CPA and financial advising front, but they are also offering these fill in the blank type of services, AI services, where they can do the estate plan too. Unless you're dealing with an estate planning attorney, it should not be a fill in the blank, one size fits all type of a service. It is very specific. It is something that should be evaluated by a lawyer who knows what they're doing. And again, if I was like a business law attorney, I shouldn't be doing estate planning unless I actually did estate planning. So I do see more of that happening. And because that is happening and people aren't taking advice from estate planning attorneys, I think everything's going to turn to litigation. We saw this in the past with services like LegalZoom, where people go ahead and they do it themselves. They save a ton of money, and then things aren't done properly. Everything ends up in probate. And now it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. So, yes, you may have only paid a couple $100s or gotten it for free, but it's actually going to cost your estate tens of thousands of dollars, if not more.
And another thing you mentioned, and I might get this quote a little off, but close enough. You kind of mentioned AI is comparable to having a seasoned paralegal. So you're not anti AI. You definitely see it as a beneficial tool. So where inside the legal practice for you is AI actually earning its keep, in your opinion?
Yes. So there are definitely types of AI services that I think are great. You do have to be careful because I don't know if you've ever heard, but it was in the news about how lawyers had been using like ChatGPT and things like that to prepare briefs. And then it would create false law. Definitely fact check. If you pay for a program that's specifically geared to your practice area, so there's a number of programs that I use that I absolutely love. Needless to say, they are AI generated, but they're also lawyer backed. So there are lawyers doing research on the back end. And so when they're citing to sources, it's legitimate sources. I understand that it's lawyer backed. I'm still checking the sources. So the nice thing is if I have a question, I can run it through any of my lawyer AI. It's going to go ahead and give me the citations. It's going to run me through the process. I can do this research so much faster than I've ever been able to do in the past. Or if I've given it to a paralegal, it can go faster than the paralegal can. So it's providing that benefit. It's more cost effective for my clients. I can then also go down different scenarios because oftentimes when we do research, it's like, here's the answer to this. But what if this is also a factor too? Now you have to research there. I can do all of that in, a fraction of the time it used to take, or the fraction of time it used to take my paralegal. There is still definitely a time and place for having a paralegal that AI cannot replace. But again, where we can go ahead and become more efficient and save time, it's benefiting our clients, it's benefiting our businesses. We're able to serve more people, help more people out because we have these resources that just make things more streamlined.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think at this point, our audience is all kind of nodding their heads in agreement, to most of this. It all makes sense. You made a decision at the top of the year to deliberately cut ties with a legal insurance referral source that was feeding you a good chunk of business. And because of the way that they were operating, you didn't want to work with them anymore. That takes guts. So, what's been the biggest obstacle there in replacing that revenue for you?
It's pretty much replacing that revenue. So I'm excellent at what I do. As far as marketing, I'm not as great at that. I do find other lawyers are excellent at marketing and they're not good at what they do. So it's this fine balance of the two. So I have been definitely looking into things to go ahead and let people know I exist. I have been around for quite some time. Again, my special, like my areas of practice with the crossover is very, very unique, but I do regular estate planning services and trust administration. I do regular immigration, business immigration, entrepreneurs, all of that. So it's a matter of having the people find me. We've been a little bit more proactive on asking people for Google reviews. I hate Google reviews because you get more people that want to complain than actually reach out and do it. I've been very lucky that most of the people that we've asked, they've gone ahead and given them. Sometimes people leave reviews that were never clients and they're angry with us because we wouldn't provide client information to them. I can't ethically, so I'm protecting my clients. I always will. So it's a matter of balancing all of that, making sure everybody's happy, knowing what we do, and making sure that they have a good experience. And I feel like after 17 years, we have our processes pretty streamlined so that way everybody has a good experience and that it is still tailored to them.
If you had that magic wand of getting 5 hours back from, what you do very well, but it just takes up a lot of your time, what would you allocate that time to? Would it be creating content, going out, following up with existing clients for referral business, or where would you put that effort?
Definitely put the effort into creating more content just because it reaches a wider audience. And then also doing more like webinars or in person educational meetings. A lot of people don't know what they don't know. They have questions, they don't know where to turn to, they're afraid to call a lawyer. It just kinda depends, and I get anytime I have clients that call and say something like, "I just bought a new house, I need to update my trust." Okay, not necessarily, but we wanna make sure that house is in fact titled in the name of the trust so they can avoid probate if they were to pass away. So, educating people on those things, anytime somebody calls with a question like that, I'm like, "This is a question I get asked over and over and over again." So I go ahead and I post it in a blog. But it is also something that, reaching out to the community, having small groups of people together to let them know these are the types of things that you want to think about. This is when you want to make updates. This is what you should always be keeping tucked in the back of your mind. So, education and content creation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's more and more tools out there that can help us get that done and, buy back the time to be able to reach out and, get your name out there and let them know what you do best. So that's awesome. So, Ryan, appreciate the time. As we wrap up, I kind of wanted to zoom out. Where do you see, law firms here in the next 3 years? Say for the ones that ignore AI and just keep going as status quo, where do you see them in 3 years' time?
They're going to be struggling in 3 years' time. So, I mean, AI is here. It's not even coming. It is here. It is part of every day. If people do not get on board with it, they will lose their businesses. They'll see business slow down just because more people are. They also do need to educate people on these things too, because more people are going to start trying to do it themselves and then ultimately end up in probate. Even doing like your own legal business documents, not a great idea. So, because you don't know how things can go bad. Even if you ask AI, like it can give you all these projections, but you're like, ah, that'll never happen to me. Whereas a lawyer is like, we've seen people in your scenario and this is what happens. This is how it plays out. So the problem with law is that, we're very much books, old dusty libraries. So there are a lot of lawyers that don't want to move forward with technology. They will struggle. They'll have to they might end up retiring earlier than they planned on, trying to sell their businesses. But even those individuals typically don't have processes in place where they could actually sell their business. So I think it is important to jump on this bandwagon and try to be at the forefront of it, or at least on the ship.
Right. And do it with guardrails, right? Because to your point, you don't want to wind up in probate court or worse, from all the stories that you kind of made mention to of the attorneys up there in New York that made headlines. You don't want to be on that end of it either.
Yeah.
So that's very sound advice. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate it. This was excellent. I genuinely appreciate the conversation in, a crossroads that a lot of law firms aren't too familiar with. And so we'll do what we can to get your name out there for listeners.
Absolutely. So the easiest way to find us is our website, which is www.northcountylegal.com. You can go ahead and access that website. It has our phone number, it has a way to get on my calendar. Everything is right there. Otherwise, they can also call the office. My phone number is 619-819-5085. So those are the two best ways.
There you go. Awesome. And for everyone listening, if you found value in this, do me a favor and share it with one of your attorneys or another member of your firm who needs to hear it. And we will see you on the next show. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you.